you're right that when you go to the art house cinema, or even just like Saturday Night Live, or
Yeah,
even just TV shows,
yeah,
HBO Max, even though I think HBO Max does a really good job of just making great art. But you definitely get this sense, if you're of that like New York Times, New Yorker, NPR persuasion, that you can sense that you're being spoken to, that your worldview is being reinforced.
hmm,
And I wonder whether different factions of the left who are having this Chuck Klosterman disillusionment moment might not want to follow, like I don't know if this is a good analogy, but Tyler Perry, like what he
hmm.
created in his media
Sure,
empire,
sure.
was because he's like, oh, there's a niche that's not being spoken
Yeah,
to,
yeah,
and I'm going to make my own infrastructure for it. Now that wasn't so much political, it kind of sort of,
yeah.
but
Somewhat
not overtly political. It was pitched more
cultural,
as just like,
and yes, I think somewhat political, but cultural.
right. Um, uh, I think people would benefit from starting to think in those terms. And you do bring up a fascinating question. Why hasn't that happened on the left? Why are we not seeing this splintering off? And you address that. But you've been talking about the yellow journalism
Yes.
aspect,
Hmm.
um, at least since 2008, if not even sooner. Because I
Yeah,
think
probably sooner.
the first
Probably
time,
further back.
right? So, but the first time you like that's I think that's the earliest I remember you talking about it. So we're talking like 20 years, because I
Hmm.
remember you were working in a newsroom
Hmm.
right around the time that they bungled the move towards going online,
Hmm.
and that they didn't react soon enough in becoming an online presence, and they thought, oh, this isn't gonna, we're not threatened by this. This is like an upstart, like we're the old guard of media. Who can take us down? Fuck this, kind of a thing. And you were saying back then that we were going to return, that the future was going to be, because we're going to be a return to a previous era of media. I find that really exciting, and I remember thinking at the time, you know, the thing to do now would be to start like microbrewed media, like hyper local, with a larger cultural,
Hmm.
funnel going into it. Um, and I don't know how practical that would be business wise yet, but you predicted this change, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Where are we as far as getting there?
To the on the local side of things,
Yeah.
there's a bit more of a moat of it around it. Now you mentioned Thanksgiving. This came up in a way on Thanksgiving. So I was at my girlfriend's dad and stepmom's house, and we were talking. They were asking me about podcasting, and my girlfriend's dad is an old reporter. Like, he used
Hmm.
to work for XXI as well as like I did, and he worked for the Catholic Courier and a few other places. And I was explaining the difference between podcast fame and radio fame. So when I was in public radio, one of my favorite moments was walking into Old Soul Burrito. It's this great burrito shop that no longer exists. Walked in as my voice was playing on the radio. I was ordering a burrito.
That must have been so fucking cool.
Yeah. And the not barista, but the cashier heard my voice, heard the radio, heard my voice, heard the radio. And her eyes got like, oh, you, you're like over there, but you're here. You're over there, but you're here. Oh my God.
There's still a power in that, in
Yeah.
live broadcast in real time.
In a concentrated area. All right. That's an important distinction here with local media. It's concentrated, meaning the signal only goes so far. Yes, it's broadcast online, but the power of a local voice in a local place, it's that the power is strong. Now, I also went to go work for USA Today. I worked on the old Five Things show. It's now called The Excerpt. Terrible name for the show. I don't like the name. but I worked on there.
Hard to say and hard to type.
Yeah. Easy to misspell.
Right.
You know. So I got heard by easily, I mean, the show got downloaded millions of times a month. I mean, some of my episodes got heard by 60, 70,000 people. Like, I got emails from around the world, but they weren't concentrated. It's harder for local media to advertise to a concentrated group if your audience is spread around the world. So what happens with online versions of local media is their audience comes from everywhere. But the advertisers, the big advertisers want a bigger audience. And the little advertisers are like, well, like, why am I like, I want to advertise to the people here, not the people in Germany or Lubbock, Texas. Or I used to hear from this woman in Portland, Oregon all the time. It makes it trickier to line up the advertising, at least for now. It's getting a little better, but that's part of what's preventing this. I think what is happening, and we're seeing this a couple of different ways, is we're seeing what's the name of the show? I forget it, but basically it's a daily local podcast but it's under the umbrella of this national company where they have a setup in Cleveland, a setup in Pittsburgh, a setup in kind of like ESPN's old ESPN local, where they had ESPN outlets and reporters and a whole site dedicated to each market. That kind of idea. We're seeing that start to sprout out. We're also seeing Axios. Axios is doing something similar where they're hiring a reporter in Cleveland, a reporter in Dallas. And that happened. But I don't think that that's how this is going to crack through. I think I am more bullish on local nonprofit type outlets that could in time go for profit, because they're startups. So startups, you're going to burn through some money when you're starting up. I'm trying to start up something right now, and what happens is you invest a lot of stuff and then eventually you make money. And when it comes to media, it takes a long time to build an audience, so you're going to burn through a lot of money. So you need to be in a structure that allows for you to burn a lot of money in order to build that audience, to say that you exist. In our area, the Democratic Chronicle has a lot of cachet, even though the product isn't what it was. It's getting increasingly thin, and there's just fewer articles even being produced. Like you ever pick up a hard copy of it, it looks thinner than a magazine. It's not what it was, and that's true across the nation. If you listen to local radio news, like our only commercial over the air station is not 13 Rand, but WAM 1180. You listen to their news, increasingly thin on local. It's a bunch of national stuff, and then press release material and a few things that they culled from the internet. It's a very, very thin thing, because hiring people to collect that information is expensive. And radio is going through that transition as well, where it's like they're getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And it's easier to just go hire Dan Bongino or simulcast the local news than from TV, than actually like have a group of reporters that you should support. You're seeing a little bit different from NPR. Locally, NPR is growing, and is growing. You can see that here or there, mostly across the nation. Here's my theory. They're very specific. It's a very specific audience. It's a very specific type of reporting, a very specific type of issues touched on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been around for a long, long time. So you know it. The audience knows it. People who don't listen to it know it. They know what it is and they know what you do. So you don't have the sort of like try to understand what you are kind of scenario with them. So as in this new narrow, deep and infinite world, like they're perfectly positioned to just sort of double down on it. Execution will, you know, you could argue. Like I think they're having execution problems because of lots of reasons.